Principled or profiteering? A bold pick for the new face of Nike's latest ad campaign. Is the company taking a political stance or cashing in on controversy? I'm Imran Garza, and today's newsmaker is Colin Kaepernick. Nike calls him the most inspirational athlete of this generation. His critics call him a disrespectful sellout. American football player Colin Kaepernick became one of the most polarizing figures in the U.S. when he knelt in protest during the U.S. national anthem before games. Now the unsigned NFL quarterback is the face of Nike's latest campaign called Dream Crazy. And it's quite literally got people fired up. Social media is plastered with critics burning their products and pledging to boycott. But the billion-dollar brand has its supporters who applaud the firm for promoting a positive message. So, is this a principled stand or just a publicity stunt? Sandra Gartman takes a look.
It's a super brand with a message.
Worth should outshine color.
Nike has long taken on social issues like sexism, racial inequality, even body image, claiming to sell inspiration as well as sports gear. But this time, Nike sprinted straight into a political storm with a new ad featuring Colin Kaepernick and the caption, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything." For the former quarterback with the San Francisco 49ers, that belief is the right to protest. In 2016, he and other athletes regularly knelt during the United States national anthem to highlight police brutality and racism. It riled conservatives who said it disrespected U.S. war veterans.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, "Get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired"?
And Kaepernick believes it cost him everything. He's not played a game in 2 years and is suing the National Football League for colluding to prevent him signing with new teams. But Kaepernick's fame has only grown since, and Nike's choice to continue their sponsorship has everybody talking.
I'm impressed that Nike is making such a stand, that they're supporting Colin Kaepernick, because there's obviously going to be backlash.
What do they think they're going to accomplish with him? I think they're just doing this so he don't sue the NFL, because he's looking for money.
Critics on Twitter use the hashtag #BoycottNike to spread videos of Nike products being torched. But Nike stood by their decision.
We believe Colin is one of the most inspirational athletes of his generation, who has leveraged the power of sport to help move the world forward.
When the ad first appeared, Nike shares dropped 3%, but it was a calculated risk, timed perfectly.
Nike's a business. They're putting their finger in the air and they're feeling the wind and they're thinking about the zeitgeist. What's about to happen? The NFL season is about to begin. So the anthem controversy will be front and center. It will be reheated by Donald Trump in the midterm election.
A recent survey found that 2/3 of consumers actually support brands taking a stand on social and political issues. But if you break it down along political lines, 78% of liberals agree, while just 52% of conservatives feel the same. It's why wading into politics has always been a gamble for brands. Pepsi sparked an online uproar after releasing this ad featuring reality star Kendall Jenner handing a can to riot police. It was slammed by liberals for making light of protest movements.
Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything.
With Nike backing Kaepernick, the company has taken sides in a culture war about patriotism and freedom of expression that's consumed America. The question is whether Nike is taking a principled stand or cashing in on the controversy. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Miami, Florida is John Cardillo. He's a co-host on Newsmax TV and a former NYPD officer. In London, we have Bryn Anderson. He's the director of Brand Finance, a consulting firm that estimates the value of brands. And completing our panel from Chicago is Jamal Green. He's a community leader and candidate for mayor. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. John Cardillo, let me begin with you. How do you feel about the Kaepernick Nike campaign?
Look, I'm not a fan of Colin Kaepernick for obvious reasons, but the free market is going to decide what happens to Nike. The day after they announced the campaign, their stock took a significant hit, started to creep back. I think they lost about $4 billion in market cap the next day. Anecdotally, I've had members of my audience call into the show, email me, tell me that my own sister-in-law was at the Macy's in New York City, the large Macy's, the big one, and told me that the Nike boutique within Macy's was empty. She went into then another athletic shoe store, said that no one was buying Nikes. So in the short term, it appears that there's a bit of backlash, but I think it's too early to tell. I'm not a fan of it. I think there were better choices than Colin Kaepernick for Nike to pick. But look, if they were looking for attention, they certainly got it. It's just going to be seen whether it was good attention or bad attention for the brand.
Jamal Green, attention-seeking or principled?
Well, I think that they have a great marketing team. I usually don't agree with my other colleague here, but what I will say, and I will disagree on one point, is I don't think that they're going to take a big fall by cashing in on Kaepernick. But I do think that we should think about the fact that they have been strategically silent since they had him under contract since 2011. And so why is now the time after, he has been branded, this terror to society since now. So I think they have a great marketing team. I think that they are, cashing in and trying to make a lot of money off of this. But I applaud them for, even taking on this heat. So that's what I will say.
Okay, Bryn Anderson, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. I watched the ad, fantastic ad. I mean, it was very stirring and moving. Good job behind it, whoever was involved. Is Nike going to take a hit? I mean, if it was woke washing, as some would call it, or trying to inject themselves into not just corporate social responsibility, but corporate social justice responsibility, and we're seeing them potentially taking a hit, is that a failure then? Have they messed this up?
Well, like we've already heard, there will always be an expected hit in the short term. I think we've already seen the images of a number of consumers burning their Nikes. It's already been mentioned, a 3% drop in their share price, which is like a short-term effect. But, there's always a risk of a company, the risk to a brand when a company has an opinion, takes an opinion, particularly around sort of social and political causes. One would suggest, though, but getting behind a cause of equality and togetherness, rarely sees a negative impact on the business over the longer term. Let's not forget that the Nike brand is a brand that was built up around sort of rebellion, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There was the time when the NBA sort of stopped the use of Air Jordans, and they put Michael Jordan at the front of their campaign. At the time, a black man probably seen as high risk. And they're doing the same thing here. So the parallels can be drawn.
Yeah, John, rebellion. That's an interesting word by Bryn Anderson. Trump is still against him vis-a-vis the NFL and the kneeling and the actual protest that started everything off. He called him a disgrace. He called him unpatriotic. He said maybe he should find a country that works better for him. So you have that, and you have what could be considered the NFL establishment, because Kaepernick has an active collusion grievance against the NFL. So you're going to get a lot of young people who are going to support the rebel, right, John?
Yeah, possibly. Look, I have to disagree with Brand. Michael Jordan was not a controversial figure when he was named the face of Air Jordans. He was beloved. He had approval ratings in the United States at like the 98 to 100% range. Michael Jordan was a national icon. He was beloved by people that weren't even sports fans because he was a phenomenal athlete, arguably the greatest of all time, and he was apolitical. People admired his work ethic. They admired the way he handled himself off the court, scandal-free. So I don't think you can compare Colin Kaepernick in any way, shape, or form to Michael Jordan. Look, the other problem with Kaepernick, and you mentioned the collusion case, is everybody's assuming that it's this cabal of owners. What no one ever talks about are the other players who might not want Kaepernick on teams. He was a mediocre player at best in the end. His numbers really only bear out him being a backup quarterback at best. But other players who now have the limelight, whose merchandising dollars are soaring, they might be lobbying team ownership saying, hey, if this guy comes on the team, it no longer becomes about my athletic ability, no longer becomes about my philanthropic endeavors off the field. It becomes all about him. He had his chance. His time has passed. We don't want to play with this guy. And nobody's examining that. You know, athletic ability is only one reason why you make it into the professional leagues, right? A lot of it has to do with the way you handle yourself off the court, your public image. All of that matters to the bottom line of the team. So, yeah, maybe there'll be some younger people who buy the shoes because he's perceived as a rebel. But by the same token, every day Kaepernick isn't playing, he becomes less and less relevant to true sports fans. That's just the nature of pro sports. And to say that pro sports is somehow inherently racist, when the vast majority of NFL and NBA players are African American, that's just a stupid assertion, quite candidly. To me, Kaepernick is nothing more than a far-left grandstander who's looking for relevance.
But isn't the argument that among the vast majority of players who happen to be African American, you have them wanting to do something authentic to them and something that means a lot to them by peacefully protesting before a game? It only becomes a problem, the vast majority of players become a problem once they don't follow the script.
Well, hold on. It's not a script, though. I have no problem with somebody protesting. You can kneel. But if you're going to kneel, do it in a public place. An NFL stadium and on an NFL team that's a privately owned entity. Sure, you can do it, but you can't cry foul if your boss fires you. Right now, I'm doing this from an auxiliary little Skype studio in my network's offices. If I were to do something and form some protest in their offices and they fired me, well, that's my problem. Your First Amendment rights are sacrosanct in the public square. They don't extend to your employer's property. That's the popular misconception. That's what many of us who are conservatives have a problem with, the property rights of the owners and the fans. The fans don't like this. These athletes are way overpaid. The NFL is now the highest paid.
You don't like it.
Per
Let
game.
me ask you. Let me add to that then and ask you: would you not buy Nike sneakers now?
Look, I never wore Nike sneakers anyway because they don't fit me well. I'm a fan of some other brands, but I would be inclined not to patronize Nike, yes, because of what they're doing with Kaepernick.
Jamal Green, chime in.
You know what? What I will say is you know, they should be protesting the Catholic Church, all right, of all these different cover-ups.
Hey, look, we agree on that, Jamal. We agree on that.
But you want to protest Nike? I think we got other issues that we need to boycott here, and you probably got some Nike shoes on right now. All right, listen, I'm not gonna go there with you, but let me go back. The first things first is that Colin Kaepernick, it was proven that he was better than a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, and he was definitely blackballed and wasn't picked up by any team. So you saying that he wasn't athletic enough to be in the NFL is not technically true. Number two is you're talking about his it's not true. It's not. We looked at the numbers. You can go back to the reports. Number two,
Jamal, numbers don't lie. He was a second string guy.
You had the time. You had enough time. You had the most time here.
But beyond
number two. Okay. Number two is you talking about relevance when you talk about Colin Kaepernick coming out of the NFL. Well, let's talk about his relevance. Let's talk about the $1 million that he has contributed to charities across this country, where a lot of that money came right here to Chicago, to Assada's daughters and different organizations doing community work. All right? Talk about
Assad Shakur, the cop killer, the fugitive cop killer who's on the FBI. Who's on the FBI? No. Tell the audience who she is. Tell the audience who she is. She's a fugitive on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list for murdering New Jersey State Trooper.
I'm talking about an organization. I'm not talking about Assad Shakur here. I'm talking about an organization.
You just said Assad's daughter.
So what that it was named after her? Let's not go there. Number two.
She's a cop.
Let me finish. So let's talk about the charitable work that he has done. All right. Now, I've already said that I believe that Nike is tapping into the $1.2 trillion of buying power that Black people have in this country, in which if we boycotted one day and stood in the house and not paid for anything, the economy would crash. So I do believe that Nike is buying into that, and this is a marketing ploy to get dollars. But if you want to talk about the kneeling, that's a different story. I think those are two different topics here. He had a right to protest. He did not. He should not have been blackballed. There's been no other organization from the NBA on down, and where players protested have been blackballed. But you know, people from the right and the conservative party, I think that they have some other real concerns and deeper concerns within themselves that they need to address.
Okay, let me bring in Bryn Anderson here. Hold on. Okay, hold on. We're going to come back. We're going to come back to you, John.
Call it what you want.
John, we're going to come back to you in a minute. Let me bring in Bryn Anderson here because cop killers has been brought up as a theme. I'm not going to talk about Assata Shakur and whether people like her or hate her. She's in Cuba right now. But there was a comment that came out of the National Association of Police Organizations, and they were among those calling for a boycott of Nike. They said in their statement on their website that the inclusion of Mr. Kaepernick in Nike's Just Do It ad campaign also perpetuates the falsehood that police are racist and aiming to use force against African Americans and persons of color. So, Bryn, at the heart of all of this, you have the Black Lives Matter movement. Kaepernick felt very passionately about this. That was at the heart of his protests, about the killings he believed disproportionately of African-American people at the hands of police. That's what a lot of people believe, right? So if you're Nike and you see a cop association come out with a statement like this, what are you thinking, Bryn?
Well, it's, it affects you. It's squeaky bum time. Listen, Nike know their customers. They've been around. It's a brand, a well-established brand that's been around a long time. They have the ability to partner with the world's leading athletes within the world of sport. It's already been mentioned. Is Kaepernick the best quarterback the NFL's ever seen? Arguably not. Will he get back into the NFL? We don't know. But this is all about sponsoring him or partnering with him under a new platform. He's able, it's already been mentioned, he's able to reach a new audience. And at the heart of this is the cause. It is the, it is the just cause that Nike are behind, rather than taking an individual within the sporting world.
And Jamal, just looking at it from a purely sort of marketing perspective and knowing your audience and what resonates with people, as I mentioned earlier on, I watched that ad on Kaepernick's, it was posted on his Twitter, right, by Nike. Yeah. Extremely moving. I mean, you didn't just have him. You had Serena Williams. You had people who had overcome all sorts of adversity, people, beat brain tumors and so forth. And I compare it with something that came out last year. I think it was Kendall Jenner's ad, where she was handing out Pepsis to cops and protesters at a Black Lives Matter march, right? It seemed tone deaf, it seemed stupid, it was absolutely absurd, and everybody just sort of became friends because they drank Pepsi. Did Nike just get it right? Did they just strike the right tone when it came to hitting that sweet spot between playing politics, but also just inspiring people and tapping into something that people want to talk about?
Yeah, well, you know what? We can go in history and look at how many corporations have tapped into movements around this country, especially movements when it comes to minority communities in this country. They want to tap into their buying power. I said it just a little bit ago. $1.2 trillion that Black people spend in this country. We spend almost 44%. And so, knowing that we do, a lot of corporations have always took advantage of that. And I think that, their marketing team is technically doing that at this moment. While I think it's great that it's great for Colin, knowing that he's not in the NFL, I think it's great that we can start conversations with these commercials and these ads. But what I will say is that I don't think that we should, run out and buy Nikes because of it, because that's basically buying into what they're trying to do. But I think that this needs to further the conversation and really talk about things that solutions on how to progress this country.
And talking about solutions about how to progress this country, John Cardillo, culture wars are at play. You're on the right of it. I don't mean right as in correct. But you're on the right of it. Someone like Jamal is on the left. Someone like Jamal is on the left of it. Do you believe, when all is said and done, that what Nike has done has just exacerbated this culture war?
No, because I don't think anybody cares. Like I said, Kaepernick is not relevant enough.
Come on, people are burning their shoes. People are angry enough to burn their shoes. These are good shoes.
You've got 9 or 10 YouTube videos of people burning their shoes in a country of 330 million. Yes, most people, a lot of people don't care what Colin Kaepernick is. But more importantly, Colin Kaepernick is promoting a false narrative. The numbers simply don't bear out what Kaepernick is arguing and Jamal is arguing. In the United States, blacks and whites interact with the police in the same numbers, despite whites being a far greater percentage of the population, about 6 times greater. Of 100 police interactions, 40 are with blacks, 40 are with whites. This is numbers bared down by the FBI, the U.S. Census Bureau, and the Center for Disease Control. In those interactions, U.S. police are shooting whites twice as often and killing them as they are black. So Colin Kaepernick's evidence are YouTube videos and anecdotal stories. The math, the numbers don't bear out this narrative that the police are indiscriminately killing blacks. A quick note about Asada Shakur. She's not just
please stop.
She's on the FBI. Well, let me finish. She's on the FBI's most wanted terrorist list for a jailbreak for the murder of a state trooper, and she's in exile.
I'm totally well aware of it, but I don't want the debate to be about her.
But please
right, fair enough. I'm well aware of it, but I don't want the debate to be about her. Certainly.
Now let's talk about real quick. Black Lives Matter.
This is not about
Colin Kaepernick backs Black Lives Matter.
For him to even get on here and try to.
What do we want?
Come on, man.
When do we want them now? This is what Black Lives Matter changed in the street. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them now?
First of all, I think we should stay on topic here because this is a whole different. This is a whole different subject that I can battle you on. We don't have. I don't think we have much time to really talk about the facts here. The fact that you would sit here and say there's no racial intent of police departments around this country, and you think that police officers are doing an upstanding job. As a former police officer,
you're lying to the public. You're not using data. You're not using data. You're lying to the public based on anecdotal, race-driven arguments.
Come on, man.
You're lying to the public. Data.
Listen,
data.
Okay, John, don't filibuster him. Jamal.
Every time.
Jamal, respond.
Listen, you want me to? I didn't come on here to battle with a Trump fan and a former police officer about police killings. Okay. The fact is, I think we should stay on topic here. You had your time. He loves to come on and hog the show like he did last time. Listen, at the end of the day, is we have real problems in this country when it comes to interactions with the police department. Okay, when it comes to community relations, and that's the truth. We have had lots of situations, just like the Jason Van Dyke situation here in Chicago, in which he shot and killed Laquan McDonald, but shot him 16 times. I think that I don't know if John here would agree with that. He might. He's
being prosecuted. He's being prosecuted, right?
Okay.
He's being prosecuted. So, it's one case. Wait, hold on.
You talk about he's being prosecuted. Please tell me, since you're about data and facts, please tell me out of the 1,000 police officers that have killed black people, how many of them have been charged? Please tell me. So let's not get the fact. Don't bring me that. Oh, Jason Van Dyke is being prosecuted because that rarely happens. It rarely happens.
Let me answer it.
It rarely happens.
Let me answer the question. Let me answer the question. You don't charge police officers justifiable killing criminals. They were legal, justifiable shootings.
So he finds them justifiable. Okay,
that
so Jamal, hold on. John and Jamal. Okay.
You're lying again.
Okay, let's both take a breath here. Let's all take a breath here. I'll tell you why. Okay, Jamal and John. I don't have time, but I'm going to invite you guys back on the program once more. We can talk about this.
No, don't bring John back on the program.
Oh, come on. We'll bring you both back on. We'll talk about this specifically.
Like a true liberal, he doesn't want a dissenting opinion.
He was taking a little jibe. Don't take it so seriously, John. Okay, so Jamal and John and Bryn, I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Still to come on the Newsmakers, the founder of the feared Haqqani Network is announced dead. How will his death affect the Afghan militant group? And FIFA suspends the head of the Palestinian Football Association for inciting hatred and violence. Is the ban justified? Jalaluddin Haqqani was once a US ally, but he died one of its fiercest enemies. The Afghan Taliban announced the warlord's death this past week. Despite being bedridden for his last few years, many believed he still played an active role in the dreaded Haqqani Network, helping mastermind some of the worst terror attacks in Afghanistan. So, how will his death impact the organization? Haider Abbasi reports.
It's one of the most feared groups in Afghanistan. The Haqqani Network is known for launching sophisticated and devastating attacks, targeting the Afghan military, foreign forces, and civilians. The death of the group's founder is unlikely to change that strategy. This week, the Taliban announced that after a long illness, Jalaluddin Haqqani was dead. The armed group says he'd been bedridden for several years. It's not clear exactly when he passed away.
The death of Jalaluddin Haqqani won't have any effect on the Haqqani network because he's hardly been active since 2001, and especially in the last 10 years, as he was an elderly man.
But before he was an enemy of the US government, he was a friend. Haqqani rose to fame as a leader in the war against the Soviets when they invaded Afghanistan in 1979. The guerrilla campaign was backed by the United States. Haqqani received cash and weapons from the CIA. After the Soviets left Afghanistan, Haqqani became an ally of the Taliban in the 1990s. He even became a minister when the group ruled the country. After Washington launched its assault on Afghanistan in 2001 and the Taliban was toppled, the Haqqani network began targeting US and foreign troops. Although the Haqqani network carries out attacks in Afghanistan, it's based across the border in the Pakistani province of North Waziristan. For years, the US has accused Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, of supporting the network and its attacks in Afghanistan. Pakistan has always denied this, and in 2015, the government banned the group. But timing is everything. Haqqani's death was announced just one day before the arrival of US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Pakistan. This week, the White House cut $300 million in aid to Pakistan, accusing the government of not doing enough to wipe out militants on its soil. Haqqani gave up his leadership of the network many years ago, allowing his son to take over. So what impact will Haqqani's death have on the violence in Afghanistan? And will the Taliban be weakened without him? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Let's bring in our guests from Rawalpindi in Pakistan. We have Asad Durrani. He's the former head of Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI. In Kabul, we have the former deputy spokesman for Afghanistan's chief executive, Javed Faisal. And from Beirut is Graham Smith, the author of The Dogs Are Eating Them Now, Our War in Afghanistan. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on The Newsmakers. Javed Faisal, let me begin with you. Haqqani no more. Are you happy he's dead?
Of course. Yet another bad guy gone. Of course, we are happy for that. But that's not going to change much for us or for the region or for the world. There has to be serious efforts taken to encourage Pakistan to take action against all terrorist outfits and do not support them. Only then we will be able to have peaceful Afghanistan, peaceful Pakistan, and peaceful region in the world. We have been seeing for so many years that Taliban leaders or Al-Qaeda leaders are being killed or announced dead within Pakistan. But that did not change much because the Pakistani intelligence or the agencies are supporting terrorists. They are still harboring all terrorist outfits, and those are destroying the security and tranquility in Afghanistan in this region.
Okay.
But again, when there is one bad guy dead, it's a good news for us.
Okay, I was going to bring in Graham Smith next, but there was a direct accusation made against Pakistan. So I'm going to come to you, Graham, in a moment. Let me first go to Asad Durrani, the former head of the ISI. Sir, there was a claim in the past that the ISI sponsored, armed, supported the Haqqani network, and there's still a claim from within the US and especially within the Afghan government that the ISI uses the Haqqani network to conduct terror operations in Afghanistan. Is it true?
It was not called Haqqani Network at that time. Haqqani was, of course, a famous Mujahideen commander. His performance against the Soviet occupation was very good. He belonged to the Universalis group. And we found that he, of course, in his own Afghan ways, contributed to the resistance, did very well. But if we are going to talk about this time, right now, I'm not sure if by removing him or by his being removed or his dying, there would be any effect on the group. He gave up the command of this group long time ago. So there are others who are running this group. We must forget that such groups do not depend upon one man, and one man is gone, and after that the thing is over. Whether it is Osama bin Laden or Umar or Haqqanis, the resistance continues. That's what will happen. But since you primarily were interested in that time, I can say yes, of course, not only Haqqani, but many of the beneficiaries of that support are nowadays, sitting in Kabul and ruling Kabul and regretting, because now they know that if we continue to have the same policy of helping or giving sympathy or giving support to those people who resist foreign occupation, then these people sitting in Kabul are the ones who are going to suffer, as it's been very apparent for the last 7 years.
So, just to be absolutely clear, the Pakistani government, via the ISI and others, used to support the Haqqani Network, but way in the past, but in no way, shape or form do you believe that they support them now. That's the accusation from Javed, and that's the accusation from many in the top corridors of the Afghan government, that when people are blown up by suicide bombers, as recently as a few weeks ago, there's always the finger pointed at the ISI. You believe that's false?
The principle remains the same. People who will resist foreign occupation, because unless that is vacated, the peace will not return. The modus operandi can change. And if anyone is expecting that what is happening in Kabul is going to be uncomfortable to them, and I remember my time also when the same arguments were given by the people in Kabul. Look, gentlemen, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it's not going to target any group that is not going to act against us. So all the Afghan groups, regardless of what they are, unless they turn against Pakistan, Pakistan has no business to go for it.
Okay. Graham Smith, let me ask you to address two things. Number one, the Pakistan angle brought up by Javed, and whether the Haqqani Network was, I guess, sustained over the years by support from the ISI. And the second one, does the death of Jalaluddin Haqqani actually mean that the network is now weakened in any way?
Well, the Haqqani Network has had a diminished capacity, and certainly a diminished visibility in recent years. Part of that is because Jalaluddin Haqqani's son, Anas Haqqani, was captured in 2014. He's been held by Afghan intelligence in Kabul, and so the Haqqani Network has been loath to sort of publicize its actions too much. Part of that is also because the Haqqani Network has in some ways been subsumed by the Taliban and integrated in some ways, especially following the death of Mullah Mansour, the Taliban leader, in 2016, and the appointment of Siraj Haqqani, the son of Jalaluddin Haqqani, as the deputy to the Taliban leader. So those networks have been coming together for some years, and it's getting harder and harder to distinguish between the Taliban and the Haqqani Network. Part of it also is the rise of the local Islamic State affiliate, the Islamic State Khorasan province, which is now responsible for the majority of those big, spectacular attacks in urban centers in Afghanistan. And so those huge explosions that used to carry the Haqqani branding are now increasingly being claimed by the Islamic State.
Right. And so, Javed, as we heard from Graham, the fact that the Haqqani Network and others have become so subsumed by the Taliban, is it in the government's interest and the authorities' interest to just see them as all one and the same?
As Graham rightly said, Haqqani Network is now part of the Taliban terrorist group. They are still in Pakistan. In the recent attacks claimed by ISIS in Kabul are carried out by Haqqani Network in Taliban supported by ISI. Afghan intelligence have presented clear examples and data of those attacks that have been carried out in Afghanistan, in Kabul and elsewhere in the country. I don't think it will make any difference if Haqqani is part of Taliban or if they operate independently, because ISI is the mastermind behind all these groups. And when there is no willingness for ISI or the Pakistani military in intelligence services to support the peace process or to support the Afghan government and the international community in the fight against terrorism, I don't think we will see much outcome out of these collaborations or out of these coalitions between Taliban and Haqqani Network. Again, I will say that the main focus should be paid to bringing Pakistan into the negotiations table, to encouraging them to giving up on the Taliban and the terrorist groups. I believe that Pakistan is still having a faith on following on the proxy forces, on achieving their foreign policy objectives through terrorist means.
Okay.
When we talk about Mullah Mansour, he was killed in Pakistan. When we talk about Mullah Omar, he was found dead in Pakistan.
Let me ask Asad
when we
Duran.
talk about
Okay.
Mullah Omar, Usama,
enough.
he was killed in Pakistan.
Okay.
Or also when we talk about Quetta or Peshawar Shuras, those are in Pakistan, not in
Okay,
Afghanistan.
so let's ask our guest in Rawalpindi, General Asad Durrani. Is that fair?
I mean, this thing has gone on for a long time. I only can describe it the way I've done it earlier. If there are people there who have genuine support from the population in their areas, and if they are going to resist the occupation, and the occupation has been led by the world's mightiest alliance, don't think that it has failed only because some sort of a help or support. I mean, that's an excuse that people give. These people have usually the resistors in Afghanistan, because of the nature of the people, because of the nature of the trade, have usually prevailed over the foreign occupation every time it has happened. It has taken some time, but that is the reason for their winning. They won the war. Come on, let's not, fight the words. They won the war a long time ago, and the criteria was set by Henry Kissinger. If they survived, they won. If the security forces have not been able to do it, they've lost. So NATO lost the war in Afghanistan a long time ago. Now it's a matter of bringing them together. That's the role that Pakistan wants to play. Every time that we prepare, or the Taliban or some, these people prepare a man who can talk to them, like Mullah Mansour, when he was absolutely ready to bring the factions once again, got eliminated by the US strong. So that old theory, people who are not interested in the negotiated settlement are number one, the United States itself, and secondly, their client regime in Kabul.
Okay, so Graham Smith, the way it's seen from many in Pakistan, not just Asad Durrani, is that this is a client regime in Kabul and that the United States is at the genesis of all the problems. And even someone like Haqqani and the Haqqani Network, these are merely just symptoms of a foreign occupation. And while they might resist in an ugly and egregious way, they are part of a resistance nonetheless. What do you make of that?
Well, there are elements of truth to what both sides are saying. If I understood Mr. Durrani correctly, he was saying that there is, a genuine popularity for the insurgency within Afghanistan, and that is empirically true. The Taliban control a population larger than Cuba's, larger than Belgium's. They control a vast swath of territory, and many of the young men who sign up to fight the government do so voluntarily. They do so because they don't like the regime in Kabul. At the same time, I think my friend Jawad is absolutely correct that there's definitely support coming from inside Pakistan. I was inside Kabul when one of these bombs went off, and it was a bone-jarring explosion on the 31st of May of last year. Hundreds of people were killed, and frankly speaking, you don't get a blast that big without military-grade explosives. I didn't have to do the residue testing to know it. I could feel it in my gut when the blast wave hit us. And so, somebody is supplying very good explosives to the insurgents, and so they didn't make them themselves.
Ultimately, Javed, are you open to talking to the Haqqani Network? Are you open to talking to the Taliban and eventually having them at the table and a part of government?
Of course, we have had open invitations to Taliban to come to join the peace talks, as we have had peace with Gulbuddin Hikmatyar with Hizb Islami. We would like to have Afghan-led and Afghan-owned dialogue with the Taliban because they are Afghans and they have to come to be part of a better future for Afghans, for everyone in this country. And Haqqani, they are terrorists. Afghan government have not sent an invitation to Haqqani Network to join peace talks, but they come under the umbrella of Taliban right now because Haqqani is their first deputy, the operations deputy of Quetta Shura of Taliban. But definitely with Taliban, we want peace talks. But let me just say this again, that talks with Taliban will not be beneficial unless we force or encourage Pakistan to pressure Taliban to come to the peace talks or allow them to come to the peace talks, because we have had many examples in the past when Taliban leaders were willing to come to the peace talks. They were either killed or detained. They are still in Pakistani prisons. The ones that were willing to join the peace talks, the ones that are willing to continue the fight against Afghan people, those are still enjoying the luxury life in Pakistan, in Islamabad, in Karachi, and in Quetta. And Pakistan has been playing a double game. They are deceiving the world, telling them that we are against these terrorist groups, that we are killing them, but in fact they are harboring them, they are training them, they are financing them, and they are supplying them the latest ammunitions and weapons to kill Afghan Muslims and to destroy our institutions.
Okay. Javed, Graham, and Asad Durrani, gentlemen, I'm out of time, I have to move on, but I thank you for joining us here on the Newsmakers. When Argentina and Israel scheduled a friendly football match, many hoped for an exciting game, but the players never made it onto the pitch. That's after the head of the Palestinian Football Association, Jibril Rajoub, warned that if the match took place, Israel would use it as a political tool. He then called on fans to target the Argentine team and burn the shirt of Lionel Messi. The warning forced Argentina to cancel, and FIFA suspended Rajoub from attending matches for a year. So was this a legitimate political protest, or, as FIFA says, a way of inciting hatred and violence? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Daoud Kuttab in Amman. He's a journalist and columnist for Al Monitor. And in Tel Aviv, we have Uzi Dan. He's a sports journalist at Haaretz. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Daoud Kuttab, was he inciting hatred? The Argentines said that they were afraid. They felt attacked and targeted, and that's why they cancelled. So, was it the right decision by FIFA?
Well, the decision is a correct decision if it was done regularly, if it's consistently, if FIFA honors its rules on all issues, including the settlement clubs that are in the occupied territories where the Israeli FIFA plays in illegally in West Bank areas, then it would make sense. But unfortunately, FIFA carries out its rules in a cherry-picking way. They choose whatever they want. And what happened with Argentina and Israel was that the game was supposed to be played in Haifa. The Palestinians were not against the game in Haifa. But 2 weeks after Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, the Israelis decided to cash in on the politics by moving the game to Teddy Stadium, which is built near the destroyed Palestinian village of Malha. And that angered Palestinians. And you're right, the statements of Rajoub were unfortunate, and he shouldn't have made them.
Okay, so Uzi Dan, Miri Regev's decision to move the game to Teddy Stadium, was that at the heart of all of this, and was that incitement?
Well, it was not the heart, but it was a foolish decision by Minister Regev, because Argentina did play in Jerusalem 20 years ago. Teddy Stadium hosted Spain for and other big teams for official games. Ms. Regev made a mistake by the linkage she made with the 70th anniversary of the State of Israel, making this friendly game part of the celebrations. So I agree with Mr. Daoud on that issue. But Jibril Rajoub is the one that connect politics and sport, and he called for violence. To burn and to demonstrate against Messi or Argentina is not legitimate. And Mr. Daoud talked about FIFA decisions or not deciding about the Israeli teams in the settlements. This is an issue that, Jibril Rajoub is one of the people that is signed or supporting the Oslo agreements, where it's written that many subjects, including, of course, what will be with these territories, will be decided between the Israel and the Palestinians. There is the problem with Mr. Rajoub that he's trying to put everything in football into politics, which is something that FIFA and the other international sport foundation should not agree upon. Israeli athletes, Israeli teams never boycott any Arab, any Muslim athletes or teams. The other way around is happening all the time.
Okay, but they don't play them. I mean, the Israelis play within the European system. Obviously, there's 70 years of history, right?
The European system because Asia expelled
There's
Israel
a context to it.
because of the Arab boycott.
And I guess this goes to the heart of my question. What Rajoub didn't happen in a vacuum, right? So let me then ask you, looking at it from another angle, you're saying no politics in sport. You have a movement which is calling for a boycott of Israel, similar to the boycott of apartheid South Africa, where they're saying no normal sport in an abnormal society. You have Rajoub himself in 2015 going to FIFA, pleading with FIFA on behalf of the Palestinian Football Association, saying our players can't travel. Not only can they not travel outside, but they find it difficult to even travel within the West Bank and Gaza, right? Where was FIFA then to come in and say, and I know Sepp Blatter tried to talk to Netanyahu, but nothing really happened. But where was FIFA to say, hey, Israel is clearly politicizing sport? If Palestinian footballs, for whom the Israelis are completely in charge, if Palestinian footballers can't move, surely Israel's playing politics when it comes to sport, Uri?
Israel is playing politics. Israel is not. You can blame Israel for this activity, but you have to understand that, with all due respect, if people support terrorism, if people, some of the people, I'm not saying all Palestinians, I'm not saying all athletes, I'm not saying all football players. Many people want peace on both sides, and there are fanatics on the Israeli side too. But when Jibril Rajoub and the Palestinian Football Association is using the freedom of movement to support terrorism, it's a problem. Now, how? Well, by letting people, if someone was charged with a terrorism act and he is now a player and he wants to move, well, I want to check him if he's. I'm not saying don't move, don't play. And I must say that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which I'm not a supporter of him, did met with Blatter in 2015, and there was some of the problems were solved. Now, you cannot blame Israel for wanting their security, saying it's politics, when Jibril Rajoub is waving the flags in every FIFA Congress of his political ambitions inside the Palestinian authorities, and connecting football and sport altogether with politics.
Dawood, you satisfied by any of that?
Well, I think let's start with the first part of what he said. He said that the Israeli settlements, the clubs there, they should wait until there is a settlement. Well, we've been 50 years and no settlement has happened, and the FIFA bylaws are very clear. Any league can only play in another country's league with permission. So if the Israelis want to play in the settlements, they need to ask permission. The Palestinian state can say yes, or they can say no. That's the rule. So if you want to go by the rules, you have to go by the rules. Now, yes, politics is politics, and Israelis and Palestinians.
This team are playing for dozens of years. Suddenly in 2015, Mr. Rajoub suddenly discovered this team. No, it was a political act by Mr. Rajoub because of his political ambitions. inside the Palestinian
So if somebody's
Authority.
a murderer,
ahead,
if there's somebody who's a murderer and you discover after 10 years, there's no, you could, anytime if you find somebody made a mistake, you're allowed to do it. They can ask permission of the Palestinians to play in the Palestinian area. Once they don't want to recognize that the West Bank is part of the state of Palestine or under the Palestinian Football Federation. Once they recognize that, then the problem would be resolved. They don't want to recognize the Palestinian area, and yet they want to say this is not politics. Everything is politics in our region. Sorry.
Okay, if everything is, you know what? I agree with you, Mr. Daoud. And maybe this the problems with the teams in the West Bank, it is a problem, I agree. But this does not connect to the call of Mr. Rajoub for violence, for burning flags, for demonstration. He was punished for this.
I said that it was wrong. I said it was wrong for Jibril Rajoub to say that. I said that. I agree. So two wrongs don't make one right. Rajoub is wrong, and the Israeli clubs playing in the settlements are wrong.
Okay.
Maybe we should talk together. We can sign the peace agreement within a few hours.
Okay, so Dawood.
Yeah, play in Jordan maybe.
Wrap us up here, Dawood. What's this going to do symbolically or otherwise for the political side of this, and also just for the aspirations of Palestinian football?
Well, I think, the Palestinian football team federation is doing very well. In fact, they're doing better than the Israeli league as far as the rankings are concerned. They did very well in the tour right now. And they're trying very hard. There was a number of football players who were shot at Gaza by the snipers of the Israelis. But let's put that aside for now. I think, we need a political solution. We need a solution that allows everybody to live in their own country, in their own lands, and to have freedom to play sports and to have fun. So sports has to be something that is equal to everybody, and no one side should have the rules on his side. It has to be the rules equality on all sides.
Dawoud Kuttab and Uzi Dan, I'm out of time, but I thank you both for joining us on the Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.